Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute and I was originally gonna wait to make this video until I had the Storm Arena Sagat figure in hand, but honestly, I really don't even need to anymore because a Reddit user under the name 112thGhoul on the action figure subreddit just posted some really great side-by-side comparison photos. And these photos really just sort of confirm everything I was already planning to talk about in the video. So I figured, let's just do it. Let's break it down and we can get into it. Storm Arena Sagat versus Jada Sagat. So let's get one thing out of the way up front. I'm going to agree with like the 99% of people online that the Storm Arena Sagat has an overall better sculpt, right? It has like more realistic details. There's more definition in the muscles. He's more angular and aggressive and badass. So with that, I really actually agree with a lot of the people who are saying the Storm Arena Sagat has a better sculpt. But sculpt can be subjective, you know, it's aesthetic. Some people might actually prefer the Jada sculpt style, and that's totally valid. You know, there are two very different design philosophies, and because the figures are already pretty close in size and presence, the sculpt alone doesn't really carry as much weight for me. So, you know, and I'm going to be blunt here. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm just going to come out and say it. I believe the Jada Sagat figure is the superior figure overall. If you're a Storm fanboy, I know that probably makes your blood boil, but we're going to break it down and I'm going to tell you why. Most online reviews that I see for this figure and any of the Storm Arena figures versus Jada figures almost always entirely focus on the sculpt. But I think they need to spend more time talking about articulation and posing because in my experience, that's way more fun than just the sculpt, right? Your ability to pose, dynamic posing, articulation, and really that matters a little bit more to me than strictly aesthetics. And honestly, I think that's where the Jada Sagat figure shines and starts pulling ahead from the Storm Arena Sagat. Now, before we get into articulation, there's one thing I wanted to point out. So let's look at this photo here of them standing side by side. The first thing I noticed is that the Jada Sagat is actually slightly larger than the Storm Arena Sagat. He's a little bit bulkier, maybe even a little more imposing. And honestly, that surprised me when we saw the prototypes for Sagat from Storm Arena. His proportions and stuff made him look like he would be much larger, but actually the Jada figure is slightly bigger, which again was a surprise for me. So I think we're probably neck and neck when it comes to size and presence. Now we're going to take a look at this photo here, and you can see that there's really some limitation to the Storm Arena's ab crunch. You had that unsightly ab hinge in early prototypes of the figure, which actually they saw the complaints. They pulled back production to delay it and to quote unquote fix it. But in this early review of the figure, we see that they really actually didn't fix it. They just made that hinge joint smaller. So it was hidden under the shorts, which in return actually hinders the ab crunch even more. You can see in the review, you can barely push that ab crunch really at all before it wants to pop out of that ball socket. So that's unfortunate and is really going to limit the dynamic poses you can get with the Storm Arena Sagat. So that really is a big L for Storm Arena, if you ask me. This is one of the biggest pain points of that figure, and honestly, it's going to affect almost the entirety of poses and posability that you have with this figure, which is unfortunate. You can see the Jada Sagat has much more range, you know, like 10-20 degrees more range just strictly from the ab joint, and that really helps him with that dynamic posing. All right, next we're going to talk about something that actually I was surprised to not see mentioned in almost any, actually I don't remember or recall hearing any of the reviewers on YouTube who get these figures and do comparisons between the Storm Arena and the Jada mention this at all, which was actually kind of wild to me and part of the reason why I was planning to make this video. And it really comes down to the hip articulation. Now, Storm Arena uses drop hips, which I do not like. visually, they just don't look great. There's weird gaps when you have to use them. It breaks up the silhouette in weird ways. They never like quite go back in equally, and everything's just kind of wonky. I do not like a drop hip. And honestly, Jada doesn't use drop hips and gets the same or even better range in the leg articulation from the hip, and looks cleaner while doing it. So we're gonna look at this next photo here. There's this photo of just the leg range, and it actually, from this picture from the side, is a bit deceiving. It looks like the Storm Arena is getting a few degrees more of range strictly from the hip, which maybe he is with the drop down. It's hard to tell because the leg is on the other, on the other side of the camera, so you can't see if the drop down hip is being used there. But I would almost guarantee that it is, versus the Jada here, which you see at a 90 degree with no drop hip. But this can be a bit deceiving because in the Storm Arena figures, in my Ken and in my Ryu, you really don't get a great range of motion unless you cheat the hip outwards. The way the hips and the way the crotch piece on the Storm Arena are designed, the only way to get it to even to 90 and past 90 is for that leg to start kicking outward. So if we looked at both of these figures from this photo here, say like turned to be facing us, I would almost guarantee the Sagat from Storm Arena's leg is starting to kick outwards. And the reason I say that, and the proof that I have for that, is let's look at these images of them sitting down flat with their legs straight. So here on the side view, it looks about even. You can see the ab crunch is definitely helping the Jada get a more dynamic sort of pose there. But then when we look at them from the front view, which you see here, you can see that on the Storm Arena figure, for him to even sit with his legs at 90 degrees, those legs are starting to kick outward already like 10, 20 degrees. So with the Storm Arena figures, my Ken and Ryu, if I wanted them to kick their leg range upwards without, cheating from the hips and anything else, the legs were starting to kick outwards, which I always didn't love for posing. All of my Jada figures, including my Jada Sagat, gets a much better range with his leg straight like that. So if you're trying to do like a straight kick upwards from the front, the Jada Toys do a much better job of it. And honestly, they do it without drop hips, without weird gaps or anything like that. And because they have that soft crotch piece in the plastic, honestly, this Jada Sagat can damn near kick himself in the head. All of those Jada figures, their leg range upward straight without kicking out to the side is way better than the Storm Arena ones. So this is a major point that I've discovered in my Storm Arena figures versus my Jada figures that I don't see anybody talking about. They're kind of giving Storm a little bit of leeway, a little bit of slack here and saying, oh no, it's the same range. But what they're not mentioning is that you're using a drop hip and you're having to cheat with it kicking outward, like out sideways from that hip, which if you allowed Jada figure to do the same, their legs, honestly, are kicking damn near 100 straight up into the air, like a 12-6. Like, it's pretty insane. So with the hip articulation and the range of the leg for kicking, honestly, the Jada figure is superior, not just in this Sagat. This is something that I figured would happen, and the reason why I was planning to make this video, this is one of the main points, is that nobody mentions this, and it's an issue. Like, the Storm Arena figures do not have a great range of motion in their legs if you're keeping the leg straight and not kicking it outwards. So I wanted to bring that up because in the Jada figures, far superior in that sense. So when we're looking at all of these other sort of just dynamic pose images, you can really see that here, right? Like, look here, you can see how the Storm Arena legs kind of kicking at an angle versus the Jada, which is straight on. His ab crunch gives him like a much more dynamic pose in a lot of these. When they're crouching down to do like the tiger shot, you can see that the Jada figure gets much lower. Looks like it's just a little more well balanced underneath that articulation. It's really getting low. Those articulated joints are really doing their job here, and you can definitely see that in the image you see here. Okay, and since we're here on this image, there's something else that I wanted to point out. Another bit of a pain point for me that I've noticed in the prototypes and preview images that have come out that I haven't really seen anyone mention yet, and that is the butterfly joints. If you see here, the butterfly joints on the Storm Arena, especially on the backside, if you want the arms to be up front or say crossed in front of him, there's a very unsightly large gap between the torso piece and the butterfly. Like, it's very noticeable in this image here, especially when you're comparing it to the Jada version, which you see has a much more seamless, nice butterfly cut there where you can extend it to its full potential forward in front of him, and you're never getting those like weird, unsightly, large gaps in the figure. So that is something that I really don't see people mention too often, but it's something that if you look is very noticeable. So that's something to think about if you're doing photography and things like that. If you're trying to take pictures of him from behind, you're going to see those large gaps in the butterflies. So something to think about. That's another piece too where I think Jada takes it. I think some of the design and some of the engineering is just superior when it comes to things like this. The next thing we're going to touch on is the joints. Now, look at this image here. They're both in this great crouching pose. Again, that ab crunch is doing so much for the Jada figure to get him in that more dynamic pose, in my opinion. But surprisingly, after these images were dropped online, there were multiple comments calling out the ugly joints of the Storm Arena figure. And it's funny because when they very first previewed the Storm Arena Sagat, I commented on the post and said, hey, this figure looks great except for the knees. And everyone was like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, the superior joint systems. But I mean, just seeing from the average action figure collector, I think a lot of people are now noticing how weird those joints look, especially on a figure like this. And this size, like those look just really wacky. Like they're just too deformed and really look out of place when you're trying to pose them in a stance like this. And the same goes for the elbows. And surprisingly, also, if you're looking at the other image, if we go back, the Jada joints offer more range in that double jointed knee than the Storm Arena one does, as you can see there. Now, here's another small gripe from me is the foot. The Storm Arena foot seems too large, and there's like too much of a gap in the size from the ankle to the foot. It really looks disjointed, where the Jada, all those things just flow a little nicer into each other. So I really like that about the Jada figure. Now, I will say one thing I do like a lot better about the Storm Arena is the neck. They gave him this big, bulky neck piece where the shape really transitions well into the head, and when you move it around, it gives it a really cool, broad neck look compared to the Jada figure. So the Storm Arena, I give the neck articulation over the Jada, but honestly, pretty much every other piece of their articulation on this figure, I'm giving to Jada. Like it's just better posability, more dynamic, and just engineered a little better as far as the articulation goes. Like I've noticed that in the Storm Arena Ken and Ryu versus the Jada figures, say like a Dhalsim or a Bison or a Blanca or a Vega. Like the newer Jada figures honestly are better than the Storm Arena releases that we've gotten so far. And last but not least, guys, I have to mention the chest discoloration. If you've been following this, you know that Storm Arena really messed up with the first batch of releases for that soft chest piece. The color is just all over the place. It doesn't match at all. And what they were saying is that was limited to a small run that went to a convention. But honestly, guys, looking at these images here, I'm seeing this discoloration is still there. And the person who posted this OneTwelfthGhoul mentioned he got this from an official retailer in Hong Kong. So it wasn't just some that went out to the convention. It looks like some that went out to release and distribution also suffered from the discoloration of the chest piece. So that's not great news to hear, because a lot of people were thinking that it was isolated to that incident, but it looks like some might have made it out into distribution without the fix. So we're gonna have to wait and see, say the ones that go to Big Bad Toy Store and make it over here to the US, but that is not looking good, especially when they were saying it was only isolated to the ones in the convention. And I chatted with the person who took these photos, and they let me know that they got this from a retailer in Hong Kong. So guys, that chest piece might be an issue in more distribution moving forward, which could be a mess, right? Like, I don't want a replacement chest. I don't want to have to take this figure apart and risk breaking it even more just to fix the chest piece that they didn't QC correctly to begin with. So that is another huge bummer for the Storm Arena figure, honestly. And with Storm Arena, with their recent exclusives, with the paint flaking, with, falling behind on releasing some figures, we've only really gotten 2 figures. 1 figure with different head swaps, honestly, from Storm Arena. So it's like, what are we doing? Like this Sagat needed to be right on the money, and honestly, I think it's starting to fall a little bit short, especially when you have the Jada stuff that is really, really nice. So to wrap it up, guys, when you step back and look at everything outside of the sculpt alone, I honestly think Jada wins in pretty much all of the articulation categories and posing categories. So if posing matters to you, and if articulation matters to you, if that's a big deal for you as a collector, you might want to go back and look at which one you pick up. So guys, let me know. Are you interested in getting both of these? I'm getting both of them. I think they're both really cool figures. I'm looking forward to get the Storm Arena figure in hand, which I'll be sure to post a review of that when I get it. But how are we feeling about this, guys? There's some big misses from Storm Arena here, and Jada seems to be chugging along, continuing to make better figures every drop. So let me know what you guys think. Is this a fair assessment? Do you guys see the same stuff in your Storm Arena releases? Am I kind of crazy? I'm not sure, but I think I'm making some pretty good points here, because I've noticed it in my figures that I already own. And I was like, maybe they'll fix these for Storm Arena Sagat, but look at the Band-Aid for the ab crunch, right? That wasn't like a true fix. Look at the Band-Aid for the chest piece, where they're like sending out just a replacement chest piece. Like, it's not really a true fix, and we're already kind of delayed on this figure. Like, I don't think we're going to be getting these Storm Arena Sagats in the US from Big Bad Toy Store until like January, February, because if they have to keep pushing this back from these errors, and they have to keep pushing this back to fix these problems, like, when am I ever going to get this figure? And for people who don't like to wait and who don't want to get their figure like 2 months late, then they're going to have to go pay the import price. They're going to have to go to eBay, and then you're paying like $70, $80 for this figure with the discoloration, with the messed up ab crunch, with all those things that are really detracting from the figure, which kind of sucks. I wouldn't want to pay $70+ for a figure that I'm not totally happy with, when the Jada one is right there and is totally capable of, making all these great poses, look at it on camera, look at them side by side. Like, in equal lighting side by side, they don't look that far apart. And in my mind, Jada takes this one. Jada for the win. But thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. I'll have some more videos coming soon. We'll have some reviews, some unboxing, some toy hunting. So be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, guys.